Good evening. I hope you've had a great Monday and welcome to our 5 at 6:45 devotions again this week. This evening I'd like to speak to you for the next 5 minutes about non-negotiables. The non-negotiables in our lives come from our core beliefs, and it's often in seasons of change that our core beliefs can be tested. In the book of Daniel, in the Old Testament, there's the story of the king Nebuchadnezzar, who came against Jerusalem and destroyed Jerusalem and took captives back to Babylon. And 4 young men that were in those captives were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael and Azariah. And one of the first things, this was a major change for these young men, because they'd been princes in the royal household. They had responsibilities, they were serving in that household, in that capacity. And now they've got a major change. They've come into a completely different culture, completely different area to what they've been used to and what they've known. And one of the first things the king of Babylon did was to change their name, because their names were significant. Daniel's name meant God Almighty is my judge, meaning God stands for me. Hananiah's name meant God is a gracious God. Mishael's name meant who is like my God. And Azariah's name meant God who has helped. And their names were significant. And the king of Babylon didn't want anything to do with the living God. So changing their names, he was pointing them to the gods of Babylon. So he changed Daniel's name to Belshazzar, and that meant I will serve this king. He changed Hananiah's name to Shadrach, which meant, just look at it here, it meant under the command of the moon god. He changed Mishael's name to Meshach, which meant who is like a coup, which is another Babylonian god. And Azariah's name he changed to Abednego, which said servant of Nebo, another god of Babylon. And the Babylonian king did this to conform them to Babylonian culture, to have them, he labelled them. He tried to take God right out of the equation. But these young men knew who they were. They knew whom they belonged to. They knew where they'd come from, and there were the non-negotiables of the truth of God that were in their life that held them so steady that in all their time in Babylon, they actually even served in Babylon, but not once did they compromise the truth of God in their heart, because they knew their name. They knew who they were. And you know, God calls you by name. He calls you his child. He calls you redeemed. He calls you his beloved. He calls you chosen of him. And we have to be careful that in seasons of change and in difficult times, labels will want to stick to us, and labels will want to come and change our name. And we need to have those non-negotiables in our lives that says, I know whom I belong to. You are not a failure. Don't let fear and lack change your name. You are not a failure. You are not rejected. You are not useless. You are a child of the Most High God. He calls you his precious treasure. You belong to his family. And that truth needs to be a non-negotiable in our lives, so that when circumstances come and situations come that want to put labels on us, want to change our name, we can declare, no, I know my core beliefs, the non-negotiable in my life is that I know I'm a child of God. I know that I'm his precious treasure. I know that he has called me by name. And in Romans 12, 1-2 in the Message, it says this: so here's what I want you to do. God helping you. Isn't it great? God's the one that's with us and helping us. Take your everyday, ordinary life, your sleeping, eating, going to work and walking around life. So just your day-to-day, your everyday life, and place it before God as an offering. Embracing what God does for you is the best thing you can do for Him. What's He done for you? He's called you by name. He's called you His son. He's called you His daughter. Embrace that. Take hold of that. It says, don't become so well adjusted to your culture that you fit into it without even thinking. Instead, fix your attention on God. You'll be changed from the inside out. The king wanted to conform them to the culture of Babylon. Conforming is outward pressure, but being changed from the inside out is having the truth of God, that non-negotiable truth in our life that changes us, transforms us from the inside. It says, readily recognize what He wants from you and quickly respond to it. Unlike the culture around you always dragging you down to its level of immaturity, God brings out the best in you, develops well-formed maturity in you. Don't be conformed by outward pressures. Let God's truth transform you from the inside. And because these three young men said God's truth was the non-negotiable in their lives, they were able to be in Babylon and not compromise and not conform to the culture. I actually wonder how many saw the reality of God in their lives, the truth of God in their lives because of that. So my prayer for you today is that you would know that you are loved of God, you would know you are a child of God, that you would know He calls you by name, and that would be a non-negotiable in your heart as we walk through seasons of change that happen in our lives. May God bless you and be with you in the coming week. Thank you.